depending on the vertical and market, only about 40 to 60% of B2B businesses, meaning businesses selling physical goods B2B, do e-commerce today in the United States.
Jason, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thank you. It's nice to be along for the ride with you today as the host. I was lucky enough to have you as a guest on my podcast,
Yes.
episode 361. It's been a while now, but it's nice to be able to flip the script and have you interview me this time around.
100% the e-commerce edge, 600 plus episodes. My God, right? I still have to carry a big rock over the hill. So thank you for joining us. Also in this time of the year, right? It's quiet for you, obviously, these days, or no?
Yeah, look, it is. I'll work pretty much straight through, but it is. Most of my clients this week aren't going to be doing a lot, so certainly the ride into the weekend is going to be a fairly quiet one. But it's a beautiful, beautiful sunshiny day out there here in Puebla, Mexico. So yeah, just got back from walking my dogs. It's about 22 C out there right now, and sunny and clear. So I got no complaints.
Yes. So Jason, I love focus and being different. I believe that being different is much better than being better, right? And I loved your focus on B2B. For me, you're the B2B guru, right? The champion of the space. Tell us, what do you do and which customer do you serve and what do you mean by B2B?
Yeah, so I think, I've been working in the e-commerce space this will be my 26th year in the e-commerce space coming up. And for the first half of my career or so, I was really heavily focused on retail e-commerce, both in terms of the brands that I worked inside of, as well as the agencies that I helped run and build. They're all heavily focused on retail e-commerce, because retail e-commerce really has historically been 5 to 10 years ahead of B2B e-commerce. So when we think of retail e-commerce, whether that be B2C or D2C, we're selling goods and services to individual retail consumers. In the B2B world, we're selling products and services to businesses, and so business buyers. And historically, B2B has been a very human endeavor, B2B sales. And so you've had sales reps, you've had field sales, you've had inside sales, you've had BDRs, BDMs, SDRs, etc., inside these manufacturers and distributors that are largely selling to other businesses. And as a result of that human-centered connection in the B2B world and the long-standing relationships that are built in the B2B world, e-commerce has come very late. It's been very delayed coming to the B2B world. Now, if we broaden the term outside of self-service e-commerce and we think of digital commerce full stop, EDI has been common in the B2B world for a very long time. When we think of e-procurement or punch-out, that's been pretty common in the B2B world for a long time. But having a self-service e-commerce portal has not been. It has not been common. And, it's even the terminology in the B2B world is not the same as it is in the B2C and D2C world. So even the businesses that have a B2B e-commerce selling website, they will oftentimes not call it an e-commerce site. They'll call it a trade portal, or they'll call it a buyer's portal, or they'll call it a seller's portal, or they'll call it anything other than an e-commerce website, right? And there's a whole different language set that is used in the B2B world. Like, there's analogs in the B2B world for everything that we do in the B2C and D2C world, but they're just oftentimes called something quite different. So in retail, you might say click and collect or BOPIS. In the B2B world, you'll call it will call, for example. But it's the same idea: going to a distribution center or store or an outlet and picking up an order that you paid for and purchased online. So that's the kind of, just from a context setting perspective. And when I started my independent consultancy 5 years ago, it's 5 years and 2 months now since I started my independent consultancy, I kind of was faced with a difficult decision, right? I was like, well, look, I have quite a bit of experience in the B2B e-commerce world through agency work that I had done, but I had also had quite a lot of experience in the retail e-commerce world. And when I looked out across the landscape, first of all, the over 98%, the data shows, at least in the United States, roughly 98% of retail businesses already do e-commerce today, self-service e-commerce today. So very red ocean. you're always going to have to fight for space. You're always dealing with incumbency, both in terms of consultants, SIs, platforms. It's just totally red ocean, right? It's so hyper competitive for business in the retail world. Whereas in B2B, depending on the vertical and market, only about 40 to 60% of B2B businesses, meaning businesses selling physical goods B2B, do e-commerce today in the United States. So very much a blue ocean scenario, very much a lot of greenfields opportunity. And when we look at B2B e-commerce full stop, it is growing at 8 to 10x the rate that B2C in retail e-commerce are growing at. So when we look at the CAGR, it's about 8 to 10x what retail e-commerce is, and that's projected to stay that way till at least 2030. And so that's largely a function of the industry playing catch up with retail e-commerce, because historically, e-commerce has not been a priority for the B2B world, but they're getting religion about it now. And one of the catalysts for that obviously was COVID, when sales reps can no longer go out and meet with customers on site anymore. And all of a sudden now they've got to really rapidly develop digital routes to market and even digital customer acquisition strategies, which they never used to have to do. It changed the game, right? And all of a sudden, these B2B businesses started to get religion about B2B e-commerce. And we have a scenario where the buying demographic in the B2B world has so radically shifted over the last 5 years that as at the end of 2024, Forrester research in the United States showed that over 70% of B2B buyers in the US are now millennials and Gen Z.
Yes.
So they expect a default digital services layer to be provided by their vendors, right?
Yes.
And so, but unfortunately, the buy side has evolved in B2B, but the sell side hasn't really, because most of these manufacturers and distributors, they're second, third generation family-owned businesses in many cases. They're 50, 75, 100-year-old businesses, and they do things the way they've always done them. And oftentimes the sales reps in these industries, they're knowledgeable, they're experienced, they've been in the industry 20, 30 years, and they don't really get this whole digital thing. And so it's been a slower adaptation on the sell side versus the buy side. And that's why I exist as a consultant. And that's why when I started my consultancy, I decided to double and triple down on B2B, because I saw that's where the biggest opportunity was. And I saw that there were not that many people out there that had deep experience in the B2B e-commerce world that could really bring that experience set to the table in a meaningful way. There was a few, there's a few consultancies, there's a few, SIs that specialize in B2B, but it's a really tiny subset of the overall e-commerce market. And so I thought, well, look, sure, I'm probably going to have to be a bit of an evangelist for this whole B2B e-commerce thing, but it's better than going into a market that's totally saturated where it's almost impossible to differentiate. So that's kind of how I came to be where I am. I serviced manufacturers and distributors for the first 2.5 years of my business. That's all I worked with. Then laterally, for the last 2.5 years, I've added services for SIs that want to add B2B capabilities to their business. So agencies. I've started to take on a tremendous amount of B2B e-commerce platform vendors that want help with their road mapping, that want help with their GTM, that want to help with their positioning, that want help with their messaging, that want to help with their entire go-to-market play. And then finally, investors in the B2B e-commerce world, whether they want to buy into a platform or whether they want to buy a manufacturer or distributor, oftentimes they struggle to do due diligence because for example, they might come from a retail background and they don't really know how to do due diligence on B2B enterprises in the way that they know how to do due diligence on retail enterprises. And so they'll bring me in to help them with diligence. And that's sort of the 4 cohorts of customers I serve: manufacturers, distributors, SIs, platform vendors, and investors, but all in the B2B e-commerce world.
Yes. You mentioned that plenty of growth expected for digitization and doing e-commerce, or let's say electronic transaction in B2B, but also the market size overall is substantially larger, right, than D2C is. Yeah, that's another important aspect, but it has its own I would say, characteristics, right? Obviously in B2B, and I want to talk to you about that to help our listeners understand that B2B obviously is offline and online, but also in the online you have business to business, but you have business to marketplace, and then you have first P and 3P. Let's please show more about these different, let's call them channels or way of doing business within the B2B space.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. So from a digital channel, like an e-commerce channel perspective, we've got the same types of channels that we do in the retail e-commerce world, but we've even got more channels. So, where in the retail world we've got if we've got a D2C website, for example, we sell D2C e-commerce. Well, in the B2B world, depending on the size and scale that our customers are, our buyers are, they may want to interact with us through a portal. They may want to interact with us through EDI. They may want to interact with us through Punch Out, which is effectively a digital catalog extension into their e-procurement system, because there's specialist e-procurement systems, the Jaggers, the Coupas, the Ariebas of the world. On the buy side in the B2B world, they automate the procurement process. And so they don't want to, in that scenario, they don't want to log into a portal to place an order. They want to log into their e-procurement system, create the PO in their e-procurement system, and send it back up the pipeline to the seller for automated fulfillment. Now, what we've seen over the years is that even the customers that deal with us transactionally in a totally automated way, EDI or e-procurement, they still expect a whole suite of other digital services to come via a portalized experience, right? So they still expect to be able to lodge quote requests digitally. They still expect to be able to check inventory digitally. They still expect to be able to lodge digital RMA requests, check the status of their credit account, download historic invoices, all through this portalized experience. But increasingly, and still for the last, well, I think DC360 data shows that I think for the last 5 years running, the single fastest growing digital channel for B2B is marketplace. And this isn't just the traditional marketplaces we've heard of, like the Amazons of the world.
The Amazon wholesale, yeah.
But it's a whole other set of marketplaces that your average retail consumer's never even heard of. The Fairs of the world, the Jors of the world, the vertical specific B2B wholesale marketplaces that, unless you work in that industry, you wouldn't even know what their names are. The Zorros of the world, the Grangers of the world, right?
The niche specific ones, right? There are a lot of them, yeah. Like every niche.
Niche marketplaces. And so D360 says that, as at the end of 24, they estimated that there were approximately 1,000 B2B dedicated wholesale marketplaces operating worldwide. So, and of course, Amazon is still, they have Amazon Business, so they do B2B. So all the major retail marketplaces typically have a B2B or wholesale side to their business, even if you can't tell as a consumer that you're interacting with a wholesale supplier. You might be, if what they're selling is being sold in bulk. So it's a very interesting scenario that we find ourselves in today. And a lot of the manufacturers and distributors that are out there, when they go digital for the very first time, it's a whole new world for them. And then we've got a scenario where, in order to tender for certain contracts in the B2B world, so let's say you're going to supply a government, or you're going to supply a major nationwide property developer in the United States. Oftentimes, in order to even tender for those potential contracts as a supplier, you have to be able to supply them digitally, meaning it will be a stipulation of the tender. They will say, well, unless you can integrate with us via EDI and integrate with us this way, you can't tender for this contract. And so it's kind of a brave new world for a lot of these B2B businesses out there, when they go, well, geez, we've been in business for 85 years, but we've never done this whole digital thing. Where do we start? And then, of course, the AI discussion always comes up now. And some customers that come to me, or prospects that come to me, they say, can we just skip the whole e-commerce thing? Can we go right to the AI thing? And so it's been a very interesting, evolving discussion with clients, especially over the last 12 months, where AI, a lot of businesses, they see AI as a silver bullet, but they don't really know where to start with it. So it's a very interesting place that the industry's at right now.
Yes, very interesting. And it's like a big transformation, right? Obviously, technology side of things, which obviously is available, but there's also the human aspect. How important is the, change management, as part of this overall transformation?
Well, it's probably the single biggest determiner of success or failure, if you can get the internal teams on the bus. And the number one team that most manufacturers, distributors, and wholesalers struggle with is the sales team, because sales teams historically have been the lifeblood of B2B sales. They've been out there, they've been knocking on doors, they've been going to lunches on a Friday. They've been going to ball games on a Saturday with their customers. They've been joined at the hip with their customers as this one-to-one high touch service provider that is highly knowledgeable in their vertical, and to the point where you know historically what we would typically consider communication only channels, things like email, WhatsApp, Slack, and Teams, those have been turned into de facto transactional channels because our account manager is sitting on the other side of that. And so if I attach a PDF of my PO to an email and I email that to my account manager, I'll say, hey, Bob or Jane, my account manager, hey, can you get this order into the system and get it on the way to me? Or, can you come back to me and tell me which of these items you've actually got in stock? Or, hey, I've got this project on, which would be the best item for this particular project that you sell. So, can you give me a spec sheet? Can you give me, an exploded drawing? Can you give me a MSDS? There's all sorts of interaction that happens where the sales rep, or whatever they're called inside the business, they are the glue between the vendor and the buyer, right? And what's really interesting is that that's not going to go away. And I'm not an advocate of replacing salespeople. What I'm an advocate of, and oftentimes when I'm called in initially, I'm seen as the devil by the sales team. They're like, oh, you're the prick that is going to replace us with the robots. You're the guy that's going to replace us with the machines. You're the guy that's here to cut down the amount that they pay us in commissions because you're bringing in automation. But give me 10 minutes with any sales team, and usually I'll end up their best friend by the end of that 10 minutes because I'm all about giving sales reps superpowers. What I don't want them doing, because they're very highly compensated, right? Sales reps are very highly compensated for what they do. But unfortunately, what we find is when we look in the CRM, 20 to 60% of their time is spent on an admin function, where they're keying orders into an ERP, or they're sending emails out, or they're doing whatever, but they're not adding value to themselves or the customer really. And so it's those pieces of their job that I'm looking to automate through e-commerce and digital services. And so by doing that, I free them up to go and knock on more doors, have more conversations, land more accounts, sell more into existing accounts, procure new products for existing accounts, etc. And so I'm a massive advocate for salespeople because, for the foreseeable future, B2B is going to be a human-driven endeavor. It is just going to be that, and you never even with automation, you're never going to fully remove the human component from the B2B relationship because these relationships oftentimes span decades. They're not a one transaction and done thing. You got to apply for a credit account. You got to, prove that you're a legitimate business. You have to get assigned a credit limit. You have to be onboarded. You have to be, your team has to be onboarded. You have to be onboarded into the ERP e-commerce system. Like it's a massive lift for both the buyer and the seller to create this relationship. And so as a result of that, those relationships tend to be super sticky as a result. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a better experience both for the seller and the buyer through digital services. And that's the real key here.
Yes. That's the most, I think, fundamental aspect, right? That probably they're struggling. There's a huge gap of, understanding what needs to be done. And Jason, in D2C, we talk a lot about CRO, right? Revenues, LTV, AOV. What are the important KPIs, on the B2B e-commerce side?
Yeah, it's so different in the B2B world because by definition, we have insane AOVs. By definition, we usually have insane LTVs because they're customers of ours for decades, right? Spanning even the change of staff on the buy side and the sell side. Sometimes, a buyer will be replaced or an account rep will be replaced, but the relationship lives on between the two companies. And so those kind of KPIs are really not a great way to measure digital success. But there's a few different ways to measure digital success in the B2B world. One is what as a percentage of transactions, how many of those can we get to move from our physical channels into digital channels? So some Deloitte data that they just released about 3 months ago, and it was research that they did across the US. They said that even for businesses that offer a fully self-service e-commerce experience, only about 9% of revenue comes through the portal today. So basically, if you can get to 9% of your revenue coming through digital channels, you're already doing very, very well. Like if you can get there within 12 months of a site launch, you're doing very, very well. So that's the first thing, is what does adoption of our digital channels look like as a percentage of either transactions and or revenue? That's the first thing. 2, how much additional incremental revenue do we get from businesses that start to transact with us digitally? Because oftentimes we get a revenue lift, an AOV lift, right, per transaction when they move to digital channels, because we can help them with fitment data, we can help them with cross-sell and upsell data, we can help them with discovery of products they didn't even know we carry, product recommendations, service recommendations, because usually, especially in the distribution space today, we're hardly ever just selling products. We're selling warranty services, installation services, we're selling field services, we're selling all sorts of services, maybe even subscription services around the physical goods that we sell. So what is the incremental revenue uplift for customers that transition from our physical or our like email channel or a customer service channel to our fully self-service digital channels? Then we also have to look at what is the amount of manual administration effort that is decreased by implementing these digital channels. So in other words, if a customer can come to our website, even if they buy through us through a different channel, if they can come to our website, they can check MOQs, minimum order quantities. They can check buying increments. They can check inventory levels. They can check pricing. They can check location for collection. They can check the status of their credit account, download historic invoices, all these services. If we can track the amount of activity, for example, with our sales team or customer service, that is manually managed today by us versus the decrease in the amount of manual activity we have to do to service our customers by offloading that to a digital services layer, that oftentimes is a better measure. So it's the decrease in inefficient effort that we're having to put in to service our customers versus self-service effort. So it's not just the transaction. It is everything other than the transaction where the real value is usually seen. And with digital technology mixed with AI, so when we think of conversational AI mixed with multimodal AI, there's now technology that can sit across those communication channels, i.e. email, Slack, Teams, and WhatsApp, that can intercept those communication from the customer. They can map, for example, if someone sends a PO through one of those channels, we now have technology, multimodal AI, which can strip that PO out. It can map it directly into the commerce system as if the customer logged in and placed the order through the portal. It can intercept quote requests. It can intercept inventory requests. It can intercept all, because AI is conversational now, it can interpret these natural language requests. We now can sit a piece of technology in the middle of that. And so if as long as we're tracking that and we're tracking the amount of activities in our business that now have been handed off to technology instead of being handed off to a human or needing to be handed off to a human, that's where we start to see the true ROI of digital investments.
Yes, yes. And what are some of the major, let's say, technology building blocks of such a transformation and some of the leading providers in each one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Shopify has made a lot of noise over the last couple of years about B2B on Shopify Plus. It's still, they're still playing catch up in a big way. So the technology that works really, really well in the B2C and D2C world doesn't really translate that well into the wholesale and manufacturing world. So we have platforms that are either B2B exclusive or B2B heavy, meaning that from the ground up, they were designed to do all and cover all these complex use cases. Platforms like Oro, platforms like VTEX, platforms like Better Commerce, platforms like Kibo. There's about 40 major and less well-known B2B platforms out there, or B2B heavy platforms out there. So there hasn't yet been the consolidation in B2B technology like there has, in the B2C and D2C world. Kind of the design patterns are well understood, they're well known, and they're very common, right? They're very vanilla. Most B2C businesses, they'll start out with maybe a Shopify, a Klaviyo, and a QuickBooks. Then when they get a little bit bigger, maybe they'll go from QuickBooks to NetSuite. Then when they get a little bit bigger, maybe they'll add a PIM system in there. Then maybe when they get a little bit bigger, then they kind of outgrow maybe Klaviyo and then maybe move to a full-blown CDP system. So there's this well-trodden path of design patterns in the B2C and D2C world. Because B2B is so complex and every business is so unique in the way that they sell their products into market, there hasn't been this total standardization, and particularly in the back office. Like there's like 30 major ERPs that we have to think about in the wholesale world, right? As opposed to one or two that might be common in the retail world. So, but there is a day coming over the next couple of years where we're already starting to see radical consolidation of these. You're not going to get 3 years out from now and have 40 major B2B platform players. You're just not. The market just is never going to allow for that. You're also not going to have the number of SIs that the acqui-hiring is starting to accelerate in the B2B world. So we look at SIs like Zaylab, for example, acquiring Trellis and acquiring some other B2B focused digital agencies to grow their agency practice. And so we're already starting to see consolidation. And if you look out, that acceleration, that consolidation is going to accelerate. We're already starting to see it also in the manufacturing and distribution world, particularly in distribution, because the gap between the digital laggards and the digital leaders is growing so fast that the digital leaders are acquiring the digital laggards in the distribution world and then infusing them with digital DNA and then like doubling or tripling their business within the first year of acquisition. So we're seeing some massive M&A activity, both in manufacturing and distribution, in B2B SI and B2B e-commerce platform space. And I expect that to accelerate over the next 1 to 3 years.
Nice. Jason, let's talk about the other side of the business, which is D2C brands, right? That are going probably okay in various channels. And at the end of the day, B2B from their perspective is just another sales channel or marketing channel, right? So what do you see on that side of the industry in terms of when do you suggest for people to take a look at B2B? Is it from day one? Is it after they conquered, Amazon, TikTok, B2C, or what are your thoughts on this from marketing perspective or like decision-making for founders out there?
Yeah, I would say that once you have a well-established D2C business that's stable, right? Okay. So if I'm a manufacturer or distributor and I'm selling direct to end consumers, that's what I consider D2C, direct to consumer, as opposed to B2C, which is like a retail aggregator selling somebody else's stuff to end consumers. So if you're a D2C brand today and you have a stable business, you've reached some level of plateauing, meaning that, okay, cool, we're growing, but for the first 5 years, we grew at 50 or 100% a year, and now we're growing at 10% a year or 8% a year or 15% a year, not 100% of the year per year anymore, then that tells you that you're starting to reach a level of saturation that's hard to break through without expending a significant amount of money to go after new customer cohorts, right? That's what that signal is telling you, right? And so usually once we start getting to a place where growth plateaus or reaches a level of just ultra consistency, that's when we really start to having to look at distribution. And distribution, I don't mean becoming a distributor. I mean, where is our product being distributed to get in front of new customer cohorts? And regardless of how strong your D2C business is, you might even have physical D2C stores. You might have a D2C retail play, e-commerce retail play. You might be really strong in the marketplaces, the retail marketplaces. But the reality is no matter how strong you are and no matter how much you spend, and Nike learned this the hard way, no matter how much you spend on your D2C activities, there are certain cohorts of customers that you will never be able to access because they have their favorite retailers that they buy through. They have their favorite channels that they buy through that you don't necessarily own. And so the challenge here is, how do I get into those cohorts of customers? How do I get access to those cohorts of customers? And oftentimes that means a wholesale play. That means, okay, cool, I now need to be selling to other retailers. I need to be selling to a distributor. Famously, Allbirds, now that they've just about put themselves out of business with their pure D2C play last year, they famously on their website, historically, they always said, we don't sell wholesale and we never will. Now that they're just about out of business, they threw a Hail Mary in Europe and they've appointed a European distribution partner to get it to more retail doors. at obviously a very low cost to Allbirds, instead of having to own the build out of physical stores in every country in the world, right? And so there's been there have been a ton of D2C darlings, 8 Sleep, Casper. There's been a million D2C darlings out there who have been forced, once they exhaust the opportunity of direct to consumer retail, they now go, okay, where's our next growth opportunity going to come from? And that almost always comes through either other retail partnerships or distribution partnership, or both. That's really where I suggest that these D2C brands that they start looking at further B2B distribution opportunities before they need to. Meaning that before they get to a place of desperation and they have no reasonable way, and they don't have enough demand in the market to become a tantalizing carrot for a distribution partner. No, I think that when you're at your peak and and everybody knows you, everybody wants you, I think do it early. Do it as early as you reasonably can without it breaking the back of your business.
Yes, and if you're successful in D2C and you're well known, it's much easier to go B2B, right? Because they already well known, and they can see success, great case studies and success stories, and it's much easier to sell also on the B2B side of things.
Correct.
And it's so difficult, right, to acquire new customers, to try to launch a new digital channel. And I think B2B is really, really something that any founders out there need to think about. For sure.
Well, and the other thing also, you got to remember that a lot of D2Cs, when they come to me and they say, hey, Jason, we're looking at this whole wholesale thing, but our margins are going to be significantly less. Like we got to discount our product by like 30 to 40% to get in distribution or other retail doors. And they say that doesn't really work for us. And I'm like, really? Well, let's look at the net margin of the retail side of the business, because when you take into account the sky high and rising CAC costs and all the other collective marketing costs that you have to do within the retail world, when you own every D2C channel that you sell through, that is a massive cost of business, right? And when you look in the distribution world, well, they're doing the marketing for you. They're doing the selling for you. They're getting it into the retail doors for you. Or if you're selling to a retailer, well, it's their job to market it. It's their job to put the flyers out. It's their job to do the digital marketing. It's their job to market their website, right? And acquire new customers for their business. And so the reality is, what we find is that oftentimes the net revenue is very similar. When you look at wholesale versus retail, it's just the composition of that revenue is different.
Exactly. I mean, like 20 ROAS is so rare today. If you're like 3 to 5 ROAS on Meta, right, you're already discounting, let's say, or paying 30, 40% of your revenues into this effort. So it's really the same. And as you said, they are doing the marketing, so it's a different kind of a skill set, more back-end kind of operation.
Operational skill set.
Exactly. That's the big change. Great, Jason. I wanted to choose like 3 words that are most important to you or better describe you and your beliefs.
Yeah, the 3 that come to mind for me immediately are passion, right? Freedom and purpose. And so for me, I've always tried to optimize for freedom. I'm living now in the 3rd country that I've lived in since my birth. I was born and raised in Southern California, moved to New Zealand in my early 20s. Have been living in Mexico now since early 2023. And I've always tried to optimize my entire life and that of my family for freedom. So it's personal freedom, it's financial freedom, it's location freedom. It's how can I inject as much freedom into our life as possible. And, that sometimes has meant we've had to move countries. And what we learned during COVID is that a lot of countries that say they're free were not very free during COVID. And New Zealand was right at the top of that list. And so the reality is that that's really where I come at this from. But we also have to be doing something we're passionate about to stick with it, right? Because life's hard, being an entrepreneur is hard, traveling the world is hard, moving countries is hard, learning a new language is hard. All that stuff is hard. So unless you're passionate about it, if you're running away from something, I find that's a lot harder than if you're running towards something, right? So we always want to be running towards something that we're passionate about, and that makes life a lot easier to stomach. And the final one really is purpose. And I find that in being able to give back, right? So we help with street dogs here in Mexico. I help, I give back to my community by putting out content, by having people on my podcast, by emceeing events, by trying to send the ladder back down educationally to all the new people in our industry. And that gives me a tremendous amount of purpose in this world beyond myself. And it helps us to not be selfish. So yeah, those would be the big three for me.
Yeah, it's clear that you choose freedom as the first word because it's just make you think about priorities and just probably working hard, but working hard on the important things, right?
Yeah.
And just having this balance, which is so super important. We know that 80% of, or let's say 20% of what we do generate 80% of success, right? Or revenues or whatever outcome you would like to do in something that comes with probably with learning about yourself and what are your priorities and how you can just work on the important things to generate progress, to create that progress that you're looking for. Jason, how people can find you?
They can find me anywhere. They can just Google me. They can go to LinkedIn. They can ChatGPT me. They can just wherever they search for people. But my website is greenwoodconsulting.net. But the best place to connect with me is probably LinkedIn. And then, of course, I've got my own podcast, the E-commerce Edge podcast. I'm on every platform, including YouTube. So they can find me just about anywhere.
Perfect. Anything else you want to add?
No, look, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. I'm wishing everybody a happy and healthy holiday season and a Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for hosting me today.
Thank you, Jason. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.